I believe all of us who love Captiva are interested in the early days of the island. With that in mind, the Captiva Library is attempting to gather oral histories from residents who have been part of the story of Captiva. I am Marion Chapman, and I will be talking with Ina Varble. Now, most of you know her as Ina Watson. Mrs. Watson's son, Paul, will also be talking with us. Ina, I understand that you came south from Chicago around 1930,
That's right.
and you lived in Fort Myers.
No,
Just
we came camping.
you came camping.
The very first time we came camping.
Where did you camp?
One night on Fort Myers Beach, but what you call it? Not the mosquitoes.
The no-see-ums?
The no-see-ums, they were so big that the first thing in the morning, we took off and we went to Bunch Beach.
And now where is Bunch Beach? I've never heard of that.
That is what, well, I don't know, you can try that. What they call the nigger beach. The niggers were not allowed on a beach where there were white people. So this was the nigger beach.
For heaven's sakes. And that, is that anywhere near Fort Myers Beach?
It's in Iona.
Yes, it is. It's right directly across from the point of Fort Myers Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told in 30 that that used to be the road going to Fort Myers Beach, but the 26 hurricane washed it out, and they built the new road what is there now.
Mm-hmm.
That Estero Road is the new road. The old road used to come in where you go into Bunch Beach. It would curve and come out just about where the same bridge is now, but that would put you right alongside the Gulf immediately. Where then during that 26 hurricane, well, when it got wiped out, they had to bring a new road in, and that is the road that you're driving today.
I see. Well, when did you decide to come over to Captiva for the first time?
In 30, we went over with a boat.
In 1934, we came over the first time. Very, very short. I made a mistake.
To Captiva.
Yeah, I made a
not
mistake.
To Sanibel, we came over in 30. We found a little old, dilapidated boat on the beach with big holes in it. And I used a shower curtain and 5 gallons of tar. And we fixed it up, and with that we went to the lighthouse. Well, the lighthouse, the shells on the corner of the lighthouse, they were at least 3 feet high. There were shells. Then along the beach, and I couldn't see nothing but lacy murex of this size, and the conch, what you call it, the fighting conch, because those beautiful colors. And there were shells, all kinds of shells. I know there was a little shack that was full of empty beer bottles, and I guess somebody was making beer there. I don't know. The path to that shack was lined with genonas, and I thought it was
really?
And well, of course, they were not shiny. They must have been. I didn't even think it was a pretty shell. I didn't pick one up. But I picked up the horse conch, not the horse conch, what you call it, the fighting conch, and the lacy murex. That's the only ones I would pick up.
Well, at that time, did you have any knowledge of shells, or was it?
Nope. I got that knowledge in 40. Was it 40?
Yeah, 1940.
We went to Upper Captiva, and no shells, nothing, just sand on the beach. And right middle in the center, there was a beautiful golden thing laying there. And I picked it up. It was an olive. But it was absolutely golden all over. We showed it afterwards to Scotia, the postmistress and Sanibel. She says, that is a $25 shell. Then is when I got interested in shells. If there's a price in shells, and we always tried to make money, we sold fish for 2.5 cents a pound in order to,
So we wouldn't have
buy our grocery.
Right.
Just
Well, then after you came over that first time, when did you come over for a longer stay? When you camped for a long
in
time?
35. 35. We came every winter then.
Yeah. Well, when did you, now, I understand that...
I came before she did.
You did?
Yeah. Now, in 4, that old boat she's talking about, we decided to put a blanket up on it and sail it. Well, we did. So we went up the bay, and the wind was pretty good that day. So, I mean, we decided to go ahead and see how far we could go with this thing. And we had some tents with us, not tent, but sailcloth to make a tent out of. And we always carried a bucket in the boat with sand, and some wood, so we could build a fire in the boat in case we wanted to make something to eat. We knew there was plenty of oysters to be had, so we had fish and oysters. That was number one. So we knew we didn't have no problem there. So we decided, now let's go up and see if we can find an area where we can do some good. Well, our sailing took us up to let fish pass. By this time, the wind started dying out because we started getting into the curvature, and it sort of made us go landwise. So it was starting to get a little dark. We decided to pull into the beach and just put up a lean-to, and the next day we'd come back, providing the wind would be there. If it wasn't, well, we'd wait until the wind did come back for us. So, well, it turned out I pulled in, we went through the pass, and by this time the tide was starting to take us out a little bit on the heavy side, so we decided, well, we better get into shore. When we pulled in right close to where Chadwick's house is now. Well, we couldn't, it was all undergrowth there, so we couldn't find a good enough area. We tied the boat in, so we walked the beach a little bit. By coming down towards the post office here, which we didn't know there was anybody there. I thought I found an island that belonged to me, and that was it. So anyway, we found a fair spot, and beautiful pine trees. And right in the middle of them pine trees, we decided to make a lean-to and park it overnight. But while we did this, well, the following day we did have the wind going back, so we decided to go back on the outside. So we went the whole outside to go, came back to by the lighthouse. Well, now this is a place we're going to camp for the rest of the time. Well, time was a little short. We didn't get to do it that year, but we made up our mind we were going to do it the next year. In the meantime, we had talked to someone, a Mr. Watson in Iona, and I told him where we were, and he said, well, you can take a ferry over there. You can go there by car. Then that's what we're going to do. We'll go over there by car and take a look at it first before we start moving complete camping equipment. Well, then in 35, that was the following year, we came down, and that's the first trip that we made. Oh, no, we went out of money. What the heck was it? We had quite a bit of trouble on the road. So Helm had to take the job by Weaver's at Weaver's Corner as a cook. So he's the main cook at Weaver's Camp. So while he's there, our trouble still was bad enough to where we were forced more or less to go to Bunch Beach before we could go to Captiva.
You mean it was automobile trouble?
Yeah, automobile trouble. He had an old 27 Chevy, one of these high ones, and I mean, it was a mess. Well, when we got back here, I mean, we took the car then to Bunch Beach, the original campsite that we parked on before we got to Captiva. He took the car apart, and we had that car laying the whole length of the beach there. I mean, parts all over the place. And we rebuilt the thing so that we'd have a car to go back with. But in the meantime, we needed also to get enough capital, and we wasn't about to go to work for nobody. So
Helm, now you were with them then?
Yes. So Helm decided he was going to go ahead and be the cook. In the meantime, we would take care of the camp area and see to it that the car, whatever he had to have done on the car, we would take care of that while he was working. Well, that's what we did. So he bought the parts with him. Put the car back
tires
together.
he needed.
New tires, we needed rings in there, we needed all sorts of things. Well, anyway, it took us about a week to get the car back in shape. Well, after that, now was the time we'd make a trip. So we went on a Sunday, we went over the ferry, and we came to the island.
I bet the road was interesting coming all the way up here then.
Well, we just fixed the car, and we thought we were going to lose the car again coming across Sanibel, because we almost lost the battery going out of the cage. It was dragging. We had to pick it back up. But anyway, that was about 15 miles of nothing but plain shell road that wasn't kept up.
Yeah.
It was washboard.
But do you remember, we never went down Palm Avenue. We went straight down between the two rows of pines,
Yeah.
until we got to the corner bar.
Well, we never seen nothing. Actually,
You
when
know,
we
you
came
don't
down, when
remember
we came
that,
down
do
the main road, by the time we hit the bridge at Line Pass, that was a wooden bridge when we came across it, and all of a sudden we got pavement. In Captiva, found out we got pavement on it. Oh, this is wonderful. So we drove the pavement until we went out of it. And that's where the store is today, at Palm Avenue.
The Island Store.
That is where the pavement
Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah.
So, well, from there and in, well, we just kept on going because we didn't want to be where people was anyway. It's like we didn't see nobody. There wasn't a house, no nothing. We didn't see nobody. So I just, we
Because
parked.
we went through them pine trees, we didn't
Yeah.
see a house.
So we finally got down as far as Chadwick's estate, and that was a coconut grove.
Yeah.
All of that through there was all coconut. Well,
Now, just may I interrupt you just a
All
second? I think some people that might be listening to this are not familiar with Chadwick's estate. The fact that was where the existing South Seas Plantation
no,
resort is now.
the
Chadwick's place.
existing Chadwick's plantation, what is there now,
Yeah, well,
that is another 2.5 miles further down from where his house is. His house was
It's not that far.
at least.
It's
at
the
least.
you know, the manor house.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
been torn down,
Yes,
so
yeah.
nobody would
Oh,
know
it has
about
been
it. Oh,
torn
yes.
down?
Yes, it's been torn down.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I want to specify that, because it does not exist anymore and nobody
Well,
would know where.
Yeah,
The
but the
manor-
buyer insists yet.
Hmm?
Oh, yeah, the bayou exists.
Well,
I
now the
haven't-
buyer was there. That was
Yeah.
the foreman's house from Chadwick.
Yeah.
And he is the one, when I went down to drink some water in that coconut grove, I saw that little house. So I walked over there and asked him if it was all right if we camped there.
Yeah.
His name was Williams. And he says, no, not there, but if you camp a little bit farther down for the night, we would have to ask Mr. Chadwick tomorrow when he comes back from town if we could camp at his property, you know. Well, we camped there, we never asked Mr. Chadwick or nothing, we just camped and stayed put. But somebody told us the first day, Mr. Chadwick was a sick man, and all he could eat was fish. And they said they were darned if they're going to give him any fish, that's stingy guy. Well, I felt sorry. We catching the fish, about 100 pounds on that corner in a couple of hours, you know. Don't know what to do with them. Every time I passed by, going back home, I dropped off a string of fish there. And I guess that's the reason he never bothered us.
Well, I would think he'd be pretty grateful for that.
Well, when we smoked fish, he sent the secretary down. I brought some smoked fish there. They sent the secretary if he could have some more smoked fish.
Well, the thing is that we caught so many fish, and at that time we didn't know anybody was living on the island. So actually, the fish that we was catching, we couldn't see it going to waste. So we built ourselves a smokehouse in the sand.
Yeah.
Using whatever we could find just to make our smokehouse with, and like I said, we didn't bring up nothing for a smokehouse, so we had to find whatever we could find on the island, and we'd find tin and this and that, and we'd make just an old beat up smokehouse. We smoked our fish, and then we also knew by smoking the fish, they would last. We wouldn't have no spoilage.
Yeah.
And then the next time we go out fishing, well, we wouldn't fish quite as hard. We'd take it a little bit easy because we didn't want to.
Oh, we only fished for
Yeah,
about an hour or so.
We fished for about an hour just for enjoyment, and well, that we managed to be able to consume because we would boil fish in big pots and
Yeah.
well, whatever you have. So,
What?
I mean,
Excuse me.
go
Didn't
ahead.
mean to interrupt you. Ina mentioned getting a drink of water a few minutes ago, and that sparked my brain there as to how you got fresh water, and if you got it, how did you keep it?
That's easy. When we built a campsite, the first thing, that was very first time I came there, before Mom came there, that was that one occasion for overnight. Well, we needed water at that time because we had run out because it was already in the evening. So, can't drink salt water, and we're not going to distill salt water, so we decided, let's see how far it is to the water table. But we always had a shovel with us. We had to use that for, clearing brush and whatever. So I dug down. I got down about 4.5, 5 feet at Chavez State, and I got water and I tasted it. That's clear. That was good enough. Now we got drinking
That
water.
was just about 50 feet from the Gulf.
Yeah, and that was
That close.
yeah, that close, and like I say, about 5.5 feet down, and we had good clear water, and it was not blackish. I mean, it was clear enough. Well, of course, we still boil water regardless, but nevertheless, it was drinkable and it was good. So
You were fixed on that.
I was
score.
fixed on that. So generally, the shovel usually went along also for our outhouse because we didn't believe in just going out in the bushes.
Right. Right.
So we, up north, we did a lot of whipping work, siding work. So we had little nail kegs, wooden nail kegs. And we'd knock the bottom out of them wooden nail kegs. So now we had a one nail keg that was for our toilet, which would build for ourselves. The other nail keg further on down the line, that was submerged down into where we dug for our well.
Yeah.
So that was a liner for it. So this way we could always go back to that well and just dip out whatever.
In other words, always carry a little nail keg.
Right,
with you.
that's what
very
we do.
handy.
So-
Very handy. Well, what else did you eat off the land other than fish?
Oh,
Coconuts we had galore.
yeah.
They had
I don't know what
orange grove there. They had limes and lemons, but
We didn't get them.
We didn't bother with
Because
any
we
of that
got them in
because,
town and
to be frank with you,
get
our
cups,
food,
you know. Potatoes, we got by the 50 pound and
100
grapefruit,
pounds, whatever we
a sack
wanted.
full at, what did they call them, culls, you know, where they were shipping.
Yeah.
Which they wouldn't ship. And
But
that's
see,
what
through
we,
the conveyor belt
that
in
was
the
our
earlier
staples.
days, they didn't take the
because we
small
had rice and
potatoes. The
grits.
small potatoes and any potatoes that had a score mark in it that was #1 grade, they just couldn't sell. And there was no market for it at that time. Today they can them, but at that time they were dumped outside, and then a truck would come by and haul them, and they would feed them to the animals, to the pigs and whoever would eat it. Well, we had then permission that we could have any amount that we wanted to, so these little potatoes, that was better than the big ones in the first
Sure.
place. So we we'd take a regular sack and we'd fill up a sack of potatoes, and they might have peppers going at the same time, or they might have had the tomatoes going. Whatever happened to be shipped at that particular time, we would go over and we would pick a sack of this and a sack of that. Now we had our food supply for part of our eating. Well, rabbits we knew we could find. There was no trouble getting rabbits, so we wound up getting rabbits. We had gopher turtle. Let's
Now,
see.
excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you again.
Then the Spanish diggers for salad, and the greens what grows along the bayside, kind of, I don't know, tastes like beans. We use that.
Jane Bancroft was telling me that you had some way of making a salad out of
Spanish diggers.
and then the cabbage palm. Did
Cabbage
Oh, yeah,
palm.
there was a lot of them.
And yucca blossom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you have? Well, you must have had salt and stuff with you. Did
Oh,
you?
So that we
Salt
would
and
always
coffee
carry.
and sugar we had to bring over.
Yeah.
That's about all what
That's
we
all.
We never used. Oh, we always had
Flour.
5 gallons of oil.
No, we had the flour too.
When you were camping up there, this was during the wintertime?
Mm-hmm. Only.
Well, I was wondering about mosquitoes. Did you have any of those then?
Oh, well.
Often
In the winter?
on bunch bees, but the sandflies, sometimes you just couldn't stand them. But here on Captiva, in 37, my brother had almost a breakdown. They were that bad. We came in summertime.
Oh, yes, I would imagine. And at that time, you didn't have any sort of repellent, or did you?
No.
No.
All we,
Oh,
like
they
I
had
say,
citronella, which they used, but that didn't help any.
Well, another question that always comes to my mind when I think of camping,
Mm-hmm.
did you have any problem with snakes?
there's no snakes on Captiva. I never found one. Sandoval had them.
Yeah.
not Captiva.
Mhm.
For some reason or the other, we've been very,
And,
I mean, I was always out in the woods looking, and, well, I was looking for snakes or anything else. At that time, I was a kid, and, I was just
Yeah,
more
we
or
got
less,
snakes in Iona and rattlesnakes and
Yeah.
black snakes and
well,
what.
that's we got in, like I say, the first year where she camped down at Bunch Beach now, they had plenty of them there.
Hmm.
And, well, that was a different area though.
Yeah. Well, I could do without that
Captiva,
walking
yeah.
around my
Mhm.
campground. Were there any alligators up on Captiva?
No,
Yes, there was
one,
in the big
one,
hole,
yeah,
that
in
great big one there.
okay, there was one up
There
by,
was a lake by Chadwick's, behind Chadwick's place. There was a
Yeah.
lake.
there was
Yeah.
one
And
alligator.
there was one huge alligator in there.
Well, did you ever catch alligators?
Oh yes, but we had to go to Sanibel to catch them.
Well, how did you catch them?
We usually stop at Mitchell's Lake. I don't know if you know where Mitchell's Lake used to be, the sanctuary now. And go in there behind the bushes and watch birds. And then one day we saw a bird that was hurt. So we waded through the lake and the water went up to here by me,
Right up to your neck, huh?
up to my neck, and I had to hold on to, I think it was him. And we kind of fixed the leg up from that bird, but I didn't want to go back through the water, so we went across. And I always, when I went out, I would have a stick with me where you can catch an alligator with. And not an alligator, a rattlesnake with a fork on it,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. I always carried that with me. We went there through the sawgrass, very high sawgrass. There was a little puddle of water. Of course, not thinking anything, I put that stick in there and it goes in, and I go in, and I go in, and I get in this far.
Up to your
And all of
shoulder.
a sudden, something snapped, bring it out, and that was an alligator.
And he had hold of your stick.
The stick, and he wouldn't let loose. So we had to tie his mouth, and you had him on your lap. That's the way we went back to.
How charming. Alligator on your lap.
Yeah, well,
It was
I
about,
had a 9-footer
I would
on
say-
my lap too
I
one
said
time.
it was about 3 foot, that one here.
Yeah.
It wasn't a 3.5 foot.
Well, we only took that one alligator out of there, and we only took it just for a novelty. And no, we didn't eat it. We didn't do a thing with it. We took it back to Captiva because at that time, well, I loved animals in the first place. So to me, this was something new, and I just wanted to play with something
How old
different.
were you then, but loving alligator?
14.
Oh, that's
13, 14.
No,
That's-
you were 15,
15, I
16,
guess.
going
Aye.
16.
Yeah. But like I say, it was something completely different. I've never seen one before, and well, now I wanted to have it in campsite. And we figured just for keeping it for maybe a day or two, which we did. And then we brought it back down into the area and turned it loose again. And then we forgot all about it. That was the finish of our alligator hunt for that particular time. But later, in about
So
a
we
month or
decided
2
the
months
next
later,
day to go hunting.
we had our camp area and we had too many people coming. We didn't even know there was people around. Where were these people coming from? I mean, there was no buildings or anything there. I couldn't understand, all of a sudden here's somebody looking at our fire and they're coming over there and they're looking up the skillet top to see what we're cooking and what have you now. What the heck? I mean, I thought we was by ourselves. 2, 3 days of this went on, then we decided to go back alligator hunting. That's what we did. We went down. This time we caught 6 of them. The biggest one I had was a 9-footer. Well, I got them all tied up, and all we got is a little Model A with a lumber seat. So how did we get all these animals, I dumped all the little ones in the lumber seat, but the big one, I wasn't about to dump him in the lumber seat because he took too much room and he had just too much for it. So I put him on my lap, and I kept playing with that one, rubbing his stomach a little bit, and I put him to sleep. So we got them all
I
back.
hope you had his mouth tied up.
Yes, we had the mouth tied up and we had the legs tied behind his back. So once you tie the legs behind the back, he gets pretty much immobile.
So we know that.
We know how to take care of an alligator. That we first
When
learned.
you got back to camp, did you just set them loose, wandering around?
No, I put a line on each one of them, and At that time, we had a lot of cabbage palms and everything on there, so I tied one on each cabbage palm all the way around the tent area, so that they just about overlap one another.
No, we
And
freaked
that-
them out.
We figured now, let somebody come.
Just
If
put
they want to go
harness
through
on.
these alligators, they can. Well, nobody bothered coming in the campsite then no more, except for one man. He comes down there. He had found out that the people couldn't get to our camp no more because of the alligators, and he wanted to come see. And it turns out he was from the lodge, the hotel. He was the manager.
Fisherman's Lodge.
From Fisherman's Lodge, that's the name of the
Yeah.
hotel. Well, he came down and he looked at all these alligators, and he had called Harris over and asked Harris, which was my mother's husband, if he could buy the big 9-footer. For what? Well, he wanted to serve a delicacy that night, and a 9-foot alligator would be what he would want, and he would be willing to give us $2 for the alligator.
No, $1.
No, two.
We had to clean them up.
Oh,
$1. That I remember well.
well,
That I
so
remember.
we sold him the 9-foot alligator for the $1, but we had to skin him. Well, of course, we kept the skin, the hide, so we had an alligator hide there. Didn't know what to do with it, but nevertheless, we had one laying there. In the meantime, I got the other 5 still sitting there. Well, if he can turn around and serve that as a delicacy, then there must be a reason. I mean, it must be edible easy enough. So we had questioned him on it. Yeah, you eat the tails and you can eat the legs. All right, then we'll try it. So we took one of the smaller ones. And we hadn't decided yet to eat them. I went out and I played with that small one. And we had poked in the hole to get him out of the hole with a stick. And he grabbed that stick and he had got himself a bunch of wood in between his teeth. Well, I felt sorry for the poor thing. With all that wood in between his teeth, we ought to take that out. So I turned around, took the alligator on my lap, and I started picking the pieces of wood out of his mouth. And while I'm doing this, all of a sudden I noticed he came down on my hand, and real nice and gentle. He's got my hand in his mouth now. Oh, well, that little thing, so what? I kept picking a little bit more, and hey, he's getting down a little bit heavier. Why, you little stinker, he's trying to bite me? I'll pull his mouth apart. So I put the other hand in there. I'm going to try to pull his mouth open, and hey, all of a sudden he's clamping down on both my hands. And I can't move either one of them. That's when I had to holler for help.
Were you there, Ina?
Yeah. That was early in the morning.
Did you have to get his hands out?
No, I couldn't get him out of Harris. You had to get a hatchet and put that in the alligator's mouth, and with all his might turn that hatchet over to force that mouth open. He wouldn't, otherwise he wouldn't.
And that's what we finally had to kill him.
Yeah.
In order to be able to
Because
clean
we
me.
wrote him
Yeah.
inside
Well,
of the
now,
mouth.
now that we already heard him and he turned around, he finally killed the alligator, and we figured, now, all right, we'll try it. That gave us the first time that we wanted to try what alligator was like. Well, we skinned him, used the tail the same way. We made steaks out of him. We made, it was like pork chops, it was like steak, you name it. I mean, it tasted good.
Well, did you eat the legs too, or just the tail?
Yeah.
What?
No, we ate the legs.
I don't
Yes, I
remember.
skinned back, and we had the nice little chubby round ones. If you
Oh,
want.
I don't remember that no more.
How did you cook them, Ina?
Just fry him like a pork chop.
And they were really tasty.
Yes.
You
And then
couldn't tell if it was pork or calf. Calf?
whatever you
Veal.
wanted
It's
to happen to
between
think of
veal
is
and
what it
pork.
tastes like. I mean, you can't really put a name to it. It
No
tastes
fishy
wonderful.
taste at all.
Well,
But
do you
anyway-
think that they're better? I mean, the taste would be any different if it was a bigger alligator?
Well, no,
That
we
it-
found out later on that it doesn't.
big
The
one
bigger
don't taste so
is
good.
doesn't taste so good. So when we made the bigger alligators later on, we tried once more. We decided to have steak, and it didn't quite taste as well. So
We didn't like it.
Well,
What did we do with the rest?
we smoked it. So now, after we smoked this, like we smoke fish, we tried it. The looks of it looked like Canadian bacon. The taste of it was Canadian bacon. Hey, we got Canadian bacon all of a sudden. Except going back to Chicago, I have a very finicky mother-in-law at this time, but she loves Canadian bacon. And I thought, well, here's the time. We'll find out whether it tastes like Canadian bacon. I'm going to pass this off once. Well, I did. We bought her a piece of Canadian bacon all wrapped up and put it on the table for her. Well, she cut
You
it.
didn't. That was not your mother-in-law. That was your girlfriend's mother.
You weren't married.
That's different. That was
Well,
your
anyway,
girlfriend's
she went ahead and spiced it, and boy, did she rave about it. So we didn't say nothing for a couple of days, and then finally when we told her what it was, well, she wanted to go to the bathroom to get rid of it, but she decided, no, she likes that Canadian bacon. If we ever go back to Florida, bring her some more Canadian bacon.
Another thing that has been mentioned to me is what you've had on occasion. Didn't you have ibis? Didn't you shoot ibis, white ibis, and have
Oh,
them
that's
like
a
a
bird.
turkey? Bird.
The white bird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we decided.
That was Thanksgiving. Now we had to have a turkey or something for Thanksgiving. That was the only time we ever did. That was one of them ibises, you know, wood sog or whatever
Yeah.
you call them. We had 2 of them, and oh, that meat was just as pink. There isn't anything here that pink, but and there's only breast. The rest of them is nothing but bones and skin.
Yeah.
But the breast is that thick, and it is good. It was good. We had 2 of them.
That is fascinating when you think now, of course, if you even looked at an ibis
the
with a
colour
gun in your
of
hand,
No,
you can
Richie, the
cook it.
color of it was like that box over there, like that donut box. That's the color of that meat.
How did you cook it?
What can you do? You only can use your campfire and you just fry it. Or
The only thing that
bake it. Helmut would make, we fried that, and I fried that like a roast beef. That's the way I did that. You know, the same spices in it. Now Helmut would always find somewhere tin, and he would make a baking oven. And early in the morning at 5 o'clock he would make rolls or bread, throw it in the tent, wake us up.
That's amazing.
Well, he was a baker. When
That's
he
all
first-
he did, just some bacon and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing anything, I'm just checking the tape.
But no, for our campsite, actually what we bought a couple pots, iron skillet, we had 2 of them, one big one and one
Yes, sir.
medium size, and a Dutch oven. A Dutch oven was a must in them days, with the iron lid on it, because when we went to bed, generally we have a campfire going. And that is to sit around in the evening to talk and to give us light. Well, now you got a lot of hot coals there, and always thinking about not being too wasteful. The last thing we will wind up doing would be making a pot cake. And that would be put in the hot coals and all of it covered over top and forgot about it. Then we go to bed. Well, in the morning when we wound wake up, that was the first thing that we had. We had a nice big camp cake, as you call it,
Camp cake or potato cake.
or potato cake.
Great
Because we had
potatoes.
so many potatoes, we got them by the 100 pounds,
Yeah.
you know, so we'd make a potato cake or we'd have a regular cake. Now, that was our breakfast to start with, so we had something warm to start. Because the Dutch oven would keep this definitely nice all the way
Yeah.
through, so anyway, that means all we had to do was add some coffee to it, and we already had
You
a
had
start.
it made.
All right, from there on in, if whatever else we wanted for breakfast, well, that we had to make on the side. But very seldom did we. I mean, most of the time we had 2 meals a day.
And
that's
for
what
our
we believed in.
lunch, we would make grapefruit fritters by the pile or fish fritters, you know, and take them along fishing because we would come back.
Grapefruit fritters.
Yes.
Grapefruit fritters.
Now that's something.
That is wonderful. Now, again, this comes in at some time the other after we met people on the island. There was a mention made that, yeah, we ought to be able to get all the fruit that we wanted because it was on the island here. But we never did take any fruit from the island itself because, again, the packing houses. We got all the oranges and all the grapefruits, tomatoes, everything that we wanted. Well, now you start bringing oranges and grapefruits by boat or by car, whichever happened to be. We bring them to the campsite. Well, we would bring them in by the hundreds of pounds. Well, now you have a chance of having a lot of spoilage. So rather than having these things spoil on us, well, we had to find ways of using them up. So Mom was turning on, she was making, when we got the tomatoes, well, then she would make tomato fritters. And that was just a batter by dipping a tomato in it and then putting it into the skillet, and it made a wonderful fritter. Well, why can't we do the same with a grapefruit? Why can't we do it with an orange? Well, we tried, experimental-wise.
Oh, it doesn't taste good.
The orange we didn't
The
like,
grapefruit,
but
you
the
have to take
grapefruit
all
was
the
wonderful.
peeling the inside white
Yeah.
off. And when you have a good sized grapefruit, it comes up real nice. It has to be fairly dry. And you have your pancake dough made, you know, a kind of regular pancake dough. And dip that in and fry it in deep fat.
Yeah.
And sugar and cinnamon over it. And I tell you, it's something out of this world.
And it's something that you do fast. I mean, we've always had a campfire, so that means we always had
Well, you were
Dutch
cooking
oven.
then over a regular.
over.
And
campfire
We
type
never
thing.
had nothing else but open fire. I
Yeah.
mean, this was, we found the wood on the beaches. I'd have to go gather in our campfire, and when it rained, it's the same thing. I mean, we never had no gasoline or stoves or anything. We didn't use that on the inside.
Yeah.
That was just going out to buy gasoline. Hey, we put that in the car.
Yeah.
We don't use that for cooking. You
Right.
got wood to cook with.
Right.
That
Well, it
means
was
you're taking
raining too hard, which
take a
wasn't
bucket
very
inside.
often. We had a bucket half full of sand and a grate on top, and we would cook on top of that bucket.
Well, I understand that you camped on the island, on Captiva, until 1941. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Then what happened?
No, I went back to Chicago, and then Mr. Roosevelt made a speech that he will draft every woman up to 50 years if they don't volunteer to go to work. That scared me. I packed my things and I came south to stay because there was no factory here. Stayed in Iona.
And then you came back over here again, right?
And yes, I would come. I mean, I stayed for for good in Iona then.
Yeah.
For 3 years, no, until 45, wasn't until the war was over.
Yeah.
And then we came back again here to stay here ever since.
Well, now where did you live? Or did you camp again when you came back?
No, after that we never camped no more. We built a house and we
Where was
rent-
the house?
um,
Munson, did you say?
we rented Halsey's house first, wasn't it?
Yes.
We didn't do any camping no more.
Mr. Halsey
Yeah.
is the first man that we ever met. And he used to come down to our camps.
He lived on the island?
He
as well?
lived on the island, and when we camped,
They made a
Yo-
big write-up of him 2 years ago, the black, what would they call it?
Blackbeard,
Blackbeard.
Oh,
That was Mr. Halsey.
well now, Mr. Halsey, when we camped, one night he happened to stroll into our camp area. And he was, well, I don't know, he was dressed more or less, not fancy or anything, he's just an old man, as far as I was concerned. I was young at that time, and he was ancient as far as I was concerned, but so I'd give him all the respect that I could. He'd come down to the camp and we'd talk. Well, after that first night that he came down there, he decided that every night he'd come down and keep us company. Well, we didn't know where he lived. We never asked him. And it turns out for, maybe about 2 weeks of this, he's coming down every night and enjoying himself. And we talk over different things, and he'd always be questioning me on things of old history of Germany. Well, it got one night, it started to rain. It rained pretty bad, so we couldn't sit outside, and we went in a tent and we had a good time. We decided to make some footage of that, and he ate with us that night. And The next day it rained, and generally at that time we found out when it rained once, it usually rained for 3 days solid.
Right.
So that means 3 days no going out. That
Yeah.
means you're bound to the
3
camp.
days cold weather too.
And cold weather to back it up. So that means you gotta stay right in the tent area. You're not going nowhere. Well, Mr. Hulsey at that time decided, well, we ought to come over to his house. Well, where's your house at? Oh, that's just here down the path, just a little ways from here. Well, that sounds strange because we never walked towards the post office. We always walked towards Chadwick's down to the point because that was our fishing and our hunting area. We had enough area there. We didn't have to go any other way. So we didn't even know there was a building there. Well, when Mr. Hulsey took us into his place, he happened to also, no, at that time he didn't have that little shack built yet.
No.
He met one of the other friends of ours that also come down and camp
He
periodically.
was writing for the geography.
Yeah, and he was writing for Geographics, and that was, what was his
Hammer, Mr. Hammer.
Mr. Hammer. And he would take up all plants and wildlife from different islands and this, and he would write geographic things. Well, Mr. Hulsey was also interested in his doings, so he decided he was going to build a building, a small place for somebody to stay overnight. And that was more or less built for Mr. Hammer. Well, that year Mr. Hammer didn't come down, and it was offered then to us. Why don't we go ahead and stay in the building rather than being out there in the camp, you know, in the campsite where it's wet, stay in the house. Well, that was all right. A couple nights in the house wouldn't make no difference, so it's a little easier in one way, so we did. We decided to stay in there. Well, then, back and forth talking, he finally talked my mother into buying this house. And that's the first time that we wound up being in a house rather than in a tent. Myself, I didn't like it, but nevertheless, it wound up, that was the first house that we had lived in on the island. And that house today is that little shell shop where they have the ramp going up,
Gift shop.
the gift shop.
Treehouse.
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 Right.
Yeah.
That is it. Now, that was the first one, and it was only a half a building, a shed type thing, when we got it.
Yeah.
Well, Mother decided to remodel it a little bit, so we didn't have no decent kitchen or anything in. So she had an addition put on while I was up north. When I came down, it was unfinished, and well, I never seen him work like that in my life. But nevertheless, I didn't have no tools, no nothing. I came down with the truck, all right, and the motorcycle inside the truck because I was going to go back on the motorcycle. I tore the floor out of the truck just to get lumber to finish out some of the things that they had done there. Well, I had reinforced the floor with new lumber because of the weight of the motorcycle and that. Well, now I decided to finish this up, so I made her a kitchen there, more or less a modern kitchen, whatever not. And that was the first actual building that we had. Well, this was then later on sold to, who did you sell at?
McCall's.
McCall's.
Oh, the McCall, yes, I remember.
So they liked it, and that kitchen is there yet to this day. Everything is the same as we had it in the old section. What they did, though, is build a porch to the front of it, and then finally opened it into a whole house, but still kept the back end where it was livable. Well, that is still today, yeah, like when we built it the first time.
And now called the Treehouse.
Right.
That's just so somebody.
So that was our
Yeah.
first experience in living in a house, other than being camping.
Right. I'd like to backtrack just a minute. I am still not clear where your campsite was. Was it near where Chadwick's old house
We had
was?
4 campsites, 5 campsites.
Every time when we came down, we had cleared the property so nice.
Now, where was this, though? That's what I want to know.
Oh,
Okay.
about a mile this side of Chadwick's manor house.
Yeah, about south of
Yeah.
Chadwick's Manor
Yeah.
House. Yeah.
There
No.
when we came first. We fixed that up so nice. When we came the next year, they had made a grove there. Lime grove.
Lime Grove, yeah.
So we had to move a little bit farther down, behind it. the next year we came, they sold the place. They sold it to Davis, and they built a house on there. So we had to move again. We moved 4 times, always south.
Moving
because
south. Yeah.
every time when we cleared up a nice place, somebody bought it.
Yeah.
You know.
I see.
Well, anyway, well, we've had the campsites now. Like I say, the first campsite, this was before our time that it happened, is the pine trees. There was a double row of pine trees that made a road going all the way down to Chadwick's estate. Now that went all the way down to his house practically on the beach.
Right.
Now, during a hurricane or whatever happened there, part of it washed out and the pine trees were missing. And that is where you have to turn off now to go to the post office.
Right.
But just beyond that, that lower trees were still there. And the first time we parked in between that lower trees, that'd be just like parking in the middle of the street today.
Yeah.
Except the pine needles were real nice and we didn't have to do no clearing or anything. So therefore we used that for the first night with the lean-to. And then later on, we start moving a little bit more south, or maybe 3/4 of a mile south. And that had thick area in there. And that was right close now to what we have, the Shell store. What they call that?
Tree house.
The tree house.
Yeah. That was within about 300 feet of the tree house, but on the beach.
Yes.
Now that was our actual first good campsite, and that's the campsite that we had made where we had the alligators.
Yeah.
But that was then very much undergrowth. You had, I would say, about 400 foot of beach, open beach in front of this area.
Yeah.
So when we built that first campsite, my mother, she had put a tent up, maybe 200 feet away from me, further south. And mine, I've always picked the heaviest growth that I could find. My tent would sit in the middle of this. I would knock out an area just enough for the tent and then make a pathway to the tent so you couldn't possibly see the tent from anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, when you came down the beach, there was no way of seeing a tent. Well, we turn around and make the campsite, but then in front of our tent where we walk out, then we made ourselves a regular walkway going to your tent area and a place where we can cook. And this all had to be done, well, I would take and chop down different palm trees, cabbage palms, and literally drag them over to the campsite and replant them, knowing that they're not going to last, but at least it gives me a little bit of greens. And at that time, I mean, there were so many cabbage palms down here, you didn't think nothing of it. Besides, we want the cabbage heart later on anyway, so this gives us a chance to have our cabbage heart right near the campsite. And we decided it was dead enough, then we'd take the cabbage heart out of it and we'd cook it, put a new one in there. Well, so I was constantly working, trying to keep a campsite looking pretty for myself. I don't care, because there was nobody else there as far as I was concerned. That was just for me. And that's why I got pictures yet today of the different campsites.
I'll look at those later.
Yeah. But anyway, we camped, I would say then our actual first good camping that we considered good camping, not experimental. The good camping, that was, I would say, within 400 feet of where the tree house is now, but on the beach.
Well, how long did you stay in the tree house before you moved into something of your own? Well, that was your own, I realize that, but
About 50, wasn't it, when you had the other house built?
I bought it in 48.
No, when you had the one built.
Oh, that was in 53.
I thought it was 51, 50 or 51.
And Palm Avenue was
Yeah.
53.
53?
Mm-hmm.
All right, then we had the property then from the tree house up to 53.
and then
And
you
she had one built
on Palm Avenue.
on Palm Avenue.
Well, was it anywhere around this time that you had some association with the island store, the little store?
No, that was,
That
this was all prior
that
to
was
that.
in between. I was living at the tree house when I run the island store. And
And you ran it.
He
Yes.
was in it from 46 to 49, 3 years, 4 years.
Somebody said something to me that there were rooms that you could stay in.
That was a rooming house before
Well, that
Mr.
was
Darling.
before the store.
I think in 40.
Before the store.
Before the
See,
show.
I don't know when, because I didn't even know there were houses there until somebody says there was a post office here. And then we went down, and then I saw that 2-story yellow house, and Andy Ross's sister was standing in front of it. She was running it. I think Eddie something was her name. I forgot the name.
But
She
it
was
def-
running that rooming house.
But it was definitely a rooming house, which the store was. The rooming house then,
Was a
Mr. Darling
two-story
decided to
building.
have a store on the island, and he decided to remodel this thing, so they cut the top floor off of it
Oh,
and made that into a one-story.
I was wondering because
Yeah.
as long as I've been here, it hasn't been 2 floors.
No,
so I was wondering
yeah,
about that.
well, that's the same thing. The old post office also was a rooming house, and that is where now
was a
you know
boarding
where
house.
where TM little hamburger place is.
Oh, you mean Timmy's?
Timmy's Nook.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, next to Timmy's Nook, I would say about 200 feet south of Timmy's Nook, that was the old post office. And that used to be also a 2-story, and they rented this out as a boarding house.
Yeah.
So between the 2 buildings there, they had one for rental and one for boarding. And then Fisherman's Lodge, of course, was still there. That was more or less for your winter people that came in.
Mrs. Whiteman had the Muddy Duck,
The
and she
Muddy
had
Duck.
those cottages there. But
But that was at a later date.
But you couldn't
Yeah.
rent the cottages unless you took dinner there.
But anyway, the 2-story building, when it was remodeled, then it was offered to TM's wife to run. And I don't know how it came about that Mom got in. She knows more about that than I do. How did you wind up running the store rather than TM's wife?
Mr. Davis had a stroke. And somebody told me that, and I felt sorry for Mrs. Davis. So I went up there and offered my help. Because a lot of people came there that wanted to know how Mr. Davis, and I wouldn't let them in. I kept that screen door locked, and the thing got around. How did they get a hold of that competent woman? He was out, because Mrs. Davis, she was a wreck. And I had put her to sleep, and calmed her down. And so I wouldn't let anybody come in. And then is when Mr. Darling sent for us, that he would like to talk to us. And he talked us into to run the store.
Wasn't that a restaurant one time? They were serving
No,
food there?
we did that. We
Yeah.
made it into that. It was just nothing. When we walked
It was
in
a
there,
store. There she ran that store for 1 year. But only 1 year. And every time when the boat came in, when the people would buy store, she would be in one hand a cigarette. No, that's the way Mr. Darling says. In the other hand, a bottle of beer, being down on the dock instead of being in the store.
Was Bessie Andy's
Desi-
wife?
Andy's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I met them first, Andy, he was always in white clothes and white shoes, captain. We took a couple of trips with him. He was a fishing guide. He was living in a palmetto shack between the post office and Palm Avenue.
This
there.
is Andy. Andy
That's
Rossi.
Andy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, now, how long did you run the store? How long did you?
3 years.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And still you were living in your house there
Yeah.
on Palm
Mhm.
Avenue.
Yeah.
When did you move from that house to the one on the stilts that is standing in the Gulf at this moment?
oh,
That I bought in right after Dana. When was
Early
Dana? Was in
60s, early
62.
60s, yeah.
Wasn't it 62? I bought it then.
Mhm.
And I guess the people, they liked me because when
that was
we,
Mr. Bish, you mean?
yeah, Mr. Beige. And I had worked for them. I would do some cleaning up and getting the house ready when they would come. That was my work here on the island. In summertime, yard cutting, and in wintertime, open houses and closing. And somebody thought the Bishes were Jews. One day the girl came to me, she was crying, her face was all swollen up. She says, do you know, Mrs. Watson, that they say we're Jews? I say, I know, but talk to people say all kinds of things, don't worry about it. She says, yes, but we invited everybody on this island when we had house opening, a housewarming party. You know. He says, not one invited us back. That is why, because they thought we were Jews.
And you bought the house from them?
Yeah, but they had a chance, they had an offer for $7,000. And then the storm came, and the house wasn't damaged or anything, but it was close to the beach all of a sudden.
Right.
And I told the seller, it's a shame that house is gone. Something got to be done about that house. She says, why don't you write to them and ask them if you can buy it? And I said, well, I wouldn't have the money. She says, oh, offer them $3,000. I said, I can't. I can make 2,000, but I can't make 3,000. And oh, all right, I said, write to them, and she wrote to them, and they wanted 3,000 then for me, and she wrote back that I couldn't afford it, so I got it for 2,500.
That's something. That's
But
something.
they had when I got the papers, I went over with Maybell to look at the house when it belonged to me, you know. There was two women sitting on the porch in chairs, and I looked kind of flabbergasted, I guess. And the woman says, "Don't worry, we're buying the house." I said, "You can't buy the house. I just bought the house." That's why I know that they had offered 7,000.
Oh, and you
And
already
the bishops sold it to me because I've been nice to them.
Yes.
Although they thought that I maybe also thought they were Jews, you know.
Yeah. Isn't that, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was furnished.
But the girl, she says,
Furnished.
Yeah.
For 2,500.
Yeah.
I love it. So you lived there for a long time, didn't you?
yeah, since 49 to 53, I guess.
Oh, well, Mama, you get that. You
Oh,
lived there.
you know,
You lived
Oh,
there.
yes.
No,
I
we're
mean,
talking about it.
I owned it. I lived there before, but I owned it from 49.
Oh, which one are you talking about now?
The
The one-
tree house.
Oh, the tree house.
And in 54, we finished the building on Palm Avenue.
And then you bought the Stilt House in the early 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
When did you have your your shop on Palm Avenue?
In 54, 55.
And then you decided you didn't want to do that anymore? Or did
Well,
you sell
the thing
it?
is, actually, she had the store there, and her sister brought in quite a few statues and little things, hummels,
Yeah.
to put in the store,
Mhm.
because, like I said, it was a novelty store.
Mhm.
But at that time, nobody was interested in any of that thing.
Mhm.
So, I
I
mean,
couldn't make a living with that store. So I had to still go to work.
Well, there were not very many people around to.
by this time, the people have been already starting
There
to
have
move in
been
quite a
people
bit.
around, but
No, there was
the
quite a few of them,
people were pinch pennies.
but it was tight. And like I say, nobody really wanted to go out there to spend any kind of money. And even the winter residents that came down here, they would come in the store, they would buy shells, all right. But as far as anything other for
I done,
novelties, I
I done
mean,
sewing, and still I couldn't make enough money with it. Because I didn't know anything about prices when I run that store. One job after the other they put on me. First I was supposed to use paper cups and paper plates to serve a sandwich. And I said I don't like to serve anything on paper, so they got me some dishes all right. But then it came from this, just from a lunch, it came to dinners. I had as many as 25 people coming for dinner, and they wouldn't let me buy a stove. I had to use my kerosene stove for that and a hot plate. Oh, I tell you, and then I don't know anything about America. You know, the way people live, food or anything. What do I have to go do shopping in the wholesale places? Now, what do I have to buy? What do people eat here? I don't know. And I tell you, I had an awfully hard time.
well, when she first got the store, there was nothing in it to begin with.
There was nothing
She-
in it.
It was a bare building. That was it. So she has to start from scratch. Now, what do you put in a building if you're going to run a store? Well, these are the things that she had to put together. Well, then, for the first year, she was selling strictly groceries
And sandwiches.
and sandwiches.
Now,
So that
excuse
the
me, are we
people-
talking about the island store now? Or
The
talking
island
about, yeah,
store.
yeah.
The
Well, I thought we
island
were
store.
talking about the shell shop. I
No,
mean, the
no.
shell shop.
Well, we're getting back to the island
island
store
store.
because
Uh,
this all ties in.
he got so mad at me, he came down, and I was selling oyster stew for 10 cents a cup.
That's pretty cheap.
That's
Well, and
I
ham
was selling
sandwiches.
ham sandwiches for 20 cents a sandwich.
And I'm coming down from Chicago, and on the way coming down, I'm paying 45 cents for the same thing that she's selling for 10, and this is coming down through the states. I'm paying for ham sandwiches already 50 and 60 cents, and she's selling them for 20. When I finally got into Fort Myers, I'm still paying 50 cents for ham sandwiches. How in the heck? And you're running a store, you don't make no business that
yeah,
way.
but it pays for the ham anyhow. It didn't pay for
Yeah,
my
sure.
work.
It didn't pay for the work, so she's working for nothing, actually.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I turned around and explained this to her, and I showed it to her, and, well, then the prices changed a little bit. Now,
They
we
didn't
still-
come no more. Didn't have no more so much work to do.
right,
How much did you charge then?
45 cents.
the same as what I had to
For
pay.
oysters too. I said, but it don't cost nothing. I said, just a little milk and a little butter and that's all. So I still make money on it on 10 cents. Yeah, but what about the oyster? Oh, they don't cost nothing. We have to go and get them. That's me, businesswoman. My sister says, as a businesswoman, you're a complete zero.
I understand. You mentioned back earlier when you first got interested vaguely in shells. When you got more interested, who did you go shelling with, and who did you learn all your knowledge about shells from?
Oh, Mary Alec. Who else?
Scotia, Scotia. At that
Well,
time,
Scotia, she was the first one, but
right.
made me realize that shells was money worth, you know. But still, I had the shells there. I would buy some in the shell factory, you know, foreign shells, pretty shells. But what we had here on the island, I didn't want to sell to people. I said, why don't you go on the beach and pick them? If you don't find it, come back and then I'll sell it to you. Now, that's no business.
I know,
But
but that
that's-
was a nice attitude.
Well,
That's the
That
way.
teach them about shells.
we always had a good attitude. That didn't make no money, though.
Well, who taught you all the names about the different shells?
Oh, I learned them eventually because Mary Alec and Mrs. Carr and they would go to the shell meetings, you know, and I would go with them. And
Did you ever know Mary Cunningham?
oh yes, oh
Because
yes,
I remember
that
that
was
she
right
had a nice
next.
shell shop.
That she bought Halsey's house, yeah.
And I know she was awfully kind about telling people about shells and explaining.
Yeah, she was kind of foxy a little bit too. Hey, now come and have a look. Look at what I found. Look what I found. What was that now? That was a golden olive. Look at this. I found this. Well, I had heard already from the girl across the street, Williams, or what was her name? No. You know what was living across the tree house. She had found it and sold it to her. But Mrs. Cunningham told me she found it, you know.
Yeah.
It was still alive, you know.
But people can be pretty foxy, as you say, about whether they found it or
Yeah.
Right.
bought
Well,
it or.
Well, with the golden olives, it was, and I didn't want to tell her that the woman had told me already that she got it from her, you know. I said, oh, I'm selling them in the store for 10 cents a piece. You're not? I found this. I said, well, I have them in the store, just as golden as that. Because it was not that bright gold what I had found once, you know, lighter color. She came to the store and she bought every one of them I had, and I had bought them in the shell factory. They came from Mexico.
Where did you find your best shelling around here then?
The best shelling really was always here in Captiva and the Redfish Pass.
Right off of.
Right off the pass.
Yeah. And
And then, of course, then sendable, all sendable, no matter where. If you want to go for a certain shell, like a lacy Murex, you would go to the um, Casabella, there's the lacy Murex. If you go for little miniature shells, you go to the Lighthouse or you go to Bowman's Beach. Well, eventually, with meeting people and going out with Priscilla and then shelling, I got to know the names and the places where to look for certain shells.
Angel Wings, that was
Oh.
up right at Blind Pass.
Yeah.
Because it had mud flat in there,
Mhm.
so you got all the Angel Wings, of
And the
course.
King's Crowns were in Roosevelt Channel.
Right.
Beautiful one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, area-wise, I would say that the lower part of Captiva, near Leadfish Pass, that had all the hard shells now. At one time, we wanted ashtrays or something like that. We couldn't walk the beach because we always walked barefooted. When you walked across them hard shells, that was something else. I mean,
oh yes,
so we had to walk right at the water's edge, sometimes using the water to keep from having to step on these shells. I mean, that's how loaded they were. They were up 2 and 3 foot high. Just, I mean, literally solid.
Yeah,
And
we found
between the hard shells, they had
Genonas up
these,
there, the Scotch bonnets. Once I
Oh.
found in a hole behind a tree where it had washed out 7 Scotch bonnets,
all in one spot.
all in one
yeah.
pot. And right above on the seagrass, there was the most beautiful Genonia. I reached for it and Terry Bone reached for it at the same time. Well, he let me have it. That was my first real good Genonia. That was live yet too.
In those days, of course, did you ever think about not taking live shells, or has that come with the environmental?
We didn't know how to boil them. We didn't try to boil them. And like I say, if we found a live shell, it would have had to have been up on the beach already. And if it was already stinking, well, we didn't want that near the tent site.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we usually did, through our walking, we find ant hills, and we'd throw the shell to the ant hill.
Yeah.
No, I
And
always throw them back if they weren't perfect.
Mhm.
That was a perfect one that I wanted, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Because now there's nothing like that. I mean,
I
as
have
far as
seen
the
people
number.
taking the
Well,
olives by buckets for
I
Oh
would-
yes.
I would say that during our time, in the early time, the shells were so plentiful, live
They were.
or dead, either way that you wanted. I mean, the beaches were just literally loaded with them, and depending on the weather, if you had storms, of course, I mean, you had nothing but live ones rolling in. Well, at our time, we didn't think nothing of shells in the first place. We wasn't out for money, and for one thing, we was out maybe to better a collection, but it had to be something very unusual for us to pick it up in the first place. Other than that, we didn't even bother with the shells.
Mhm.
Now, I know I made my first shell collection, and these were shells that was collected over a period of 3 months, which we usually took in the wintertime. 3 months of doing nothing but just camping. Now, we walked the beach every day, at least twice, up to Leadfish Pass and back to the campsite.
But not for
And-
shelling.
Not for shelling.
Just
We would
something
walk
nice
because
caught
we
your eye,
wanted
you
to
pick it
fish
up.
or we wanted to look at something. Maybe we had interest in animals of different types, whatever. It was just to get out. We'd be in bathing suits. There was no clothes. There was no such animal. And once we left the campsite, Mom was the only woman in the campsite. So once we got out of sight of the campsite, well, then there was no bathing suits either. The heck with it, you know. There's nobody out there. Who's gonna see what? So off comes the bathing suits, and that usually is over your shoulder, and you just keep walking. Well, you look around for different things. I mean, ever happen to be a real fancy shell there what caught your fancy because it was very colorful? You pick it up, look at it, and if it was perfect, well, so you got one shell on your hand, you forget about it. I mean, that's about it.
Yeah.
You wasn't getting out there with a basket or anything. I mean, it was just one shell because that happened to get your attention. And this you would bring home later on, and you'd just lay it on the table. And at the campsite, I had a little 3-corner table in between 3 palm trees. and that was our novelty table. Whatever we found that was unusual, laid on this table.
Yeah.
It wasn't a collection. It was just something we liked to look at because that's what we found and that appealed to us.
Right.
No, I really didn't.
It turned out that after
Those
3
shelves.
months, that novelty table turned out to be a pretty nice looking table. I mean, the prettiest shells you ever seen. I
But they
had
bring
fans
a
on
fortune
there.
today. I mean, people, the way people love
I
them.
had a fan that big.
Mm.
I mean, it was just perfect, not a flaw on it.
I
And
think it
was
was
that
in 40 when they came in by the bushels.
Ah.
Double lines paw.
Mm.
I had the biggest line paw you ever seen, and like I say, picked up individually, but not a mark on it.
Yeah.
There was plenty of line paws down there. I wasn't about to pick one of them because what the heck? What do I want to carry a shell for?
Yeah.
That's not good enough. It's got a couple worms sitting up on top of it, which could have been cleaned up, and that would have been perfect.
No, I didn't mess with that.
Don't mess with it. It's got to be perfect, and this is it. So when I found one, so naturally the shell collection turned out to be a pretty doggone good one.
Yeah.
And still, when I left to go back to Chicago, they did not go with us. They stayed right on that table for the next year that I came down. But the next year, my campsite was gone. There was a house sitting there. Somebody had bought the property and put a house right where my tent was and used my walkways and everything. So I couldn't get there no more. So we had to move to the next place.
Once a week, we would go to Sanibel playing pinochle. All the women here from the island, that was only 4. It was Bone and Eula and I forgot the other woman. It was 4 of us. We would go to Sanibel playing
That was Beulah Wiles, you're speaking.
Yeah. playing pinochle. And that's where I met the different people and people talking about shells and I got gradually interested in it. I had quite a collection, but I had it up in a box in the store, island store, and the people would just steal the prettiest ones out of them until I got made, and I wouldn't pick no more shells, you know. Not until I was in summertime, after a little storm, when I never was bored or lonesome or anything. Because if I didn't want to do nothing or didn't feel this right, I'd go to the beach. And there's how I started shelling. And talking to the women, playing cards. I got to know the shells by name.
And that was the
Yes.
story.
That's the story of my shells.
Well, you still have a nice collection.
Oh, I have a beautiful collection.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about, you talked when you first came down, your first camping bit, of how plentiful the fish were.
Oh,
Now, how does the present day compare, and when did the fishing start being less good, if that's a...
I would say
I think after the
down.
first rate tide, the fish were not that good no more like before. Before the rate tide, I think it was in 46, the first one, the rate tide.
I can't recall nothing from
Because an hour fishing, we would have 100 pounds.
after 40. I don't know anything no more because I went into the service. Prior to this, when I was camping, like I say, we'd go down to Leadfish Pass, and instead of trying to fish in the pass, we would go around and come right at the bay side where the pass just emptied out on the bay side. We'd throw a fishing pole in there, and if we didn't get a bite within 3 minutes, it was time for us to go and look for rabbits or explore, see what the island had. Because there's no sense in us standing here doing nothing. Standing with a pole in your hand, that's stupid as far as we were concerned.
Right.
Other things to do.
But when
But
they
once
start
we get a
biting,
bite,
boy,
What did
then
you do?
One
everybody
after
would
the
holler.
Hmm?
And we'd all come back, and there'd be usually 4 of us. And all we used was cane poles. We didn't believe in anything else.
What did you use for bait?
Fiddlers.
fiddlers.
And fiddlers, they were on the island, but they had the small ones on here. So a lot of times when we'd go into mainland, we'd come by old Punarassa, and just before you got to Punarassa, you got the sand flats in there. Now, all the fiddlers in the world, so we'd take a bucket of fiddlers with us. So we had enough fiddlers to go for a couple, 3 days anyway. And Other than that, then we would use from the island itself. We'd always find this little tiny spittler crabs back where that little bio is at Chadwick's.
Yeah.
We got a little bio back in there, and that's where that big alligator was in.
Yeah.
Well, on the edge there, we could always pick up some of them small ones.
Mhm.
Then we found out how to get sand fleas. Well, then we didn't have no more problem at all, because just a piece of screen, a lot of wave come in, catch our sand fleas, we got our bait. So we didn't have to go buy him bait. Well, after we got that down under control, we'd sit there and, like I say, for an hour at the most, we would have at least a full 100-pound bag of fish.
Hmm.
Well, in the meantime, we also had found out that a fishing boat comes in, and the fishermen were selling fish. So they were selling fish, and they had a store there. And that store belonged to
Mr. Randall.
Mr. Randall. That's what Andy had.
On his dock?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
right. That was a store at one time, and that's the only store they had on the island. So, well, here we could buy groceries. When we found out we could buy groceries, but he also turned around and had a fish house there, and all the fishermen would come and sell their fish, and he would pay them in cash, and then they would take them to Panagorda. By the fish
The
boat.
fish boat
Yeah.
would come in and pick them up.
So he had offered us 2 cents a pound,
2.5.
2.5. Okay.
Regardless of what kind of fish.
Regardless.
Sheep's head.
Sheep head.
8 cents for redfish.
So anyway, like I say, 100 pounds of fish, that means carting them on your back. We didn't believe in using a car, walking. So I had the job of carrying the fish on my back.
From Redfish Pass.
Redfish Pass all the
Up to
way up
Andy's
to
store.
Palm Beach Avenue. And mosquitoes, after you got them fish in a bag, that's when you find out with mosquitoes. It got to a point, don't slap them anymore, you brush them off. I mean, you were just covered with them.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, with that, instead of taking money, we refused to take the money for it. We would have him put it on the books. Now he carried an account for us. Now when we wanted flour or anything in that line, we'd go in there and we'd just get our flour, we'd get our salt, get coffee, whatever happened to be on the book. We got enough money sitting there. So
Yeah.
I mean, this was a nice setup for it. We turn around, we fished. That was fun. We got our food for nothing. That was also fun. So I mean, we wasn't spending no money.
Oh, that's great.
Our trip from Chicago, 3 months here in Florida, would cost us around $70. The
From
round trip.
Chicago to here, 3 months
3
here,
months here and,
and
back
back to
again.
Chicago. 73.
$70.
That's a nice comparison with
We
prices
always
now.
brought money back with us.
$65, $70, something like it. Never over 70.
That is absolutely amazing.
And if we wanted something, well, then we would sell the fish. We need something, then we get to selling the fish or something else. Like they begged me to come and help out with work. They begged you to
paint the roof
paint
on
the
the-
roof and the fisherman's lash. And, you know, the people would come and ask us, you know, and, well, we don't like to say no, so we would do it, you know. Of course, it also helped with the money.
Certainly, certainly. Is there anything you can think of, either one of you, that we haven't touched on about your early experiences? We're just about to run out of tape here in just a second. I think I'm going to
So the
tell us
people-
about the hurricane in 1946 in
Oh.
connection with the island store.
The people there all wanted to know if they could come to the store because it was a solid building. If they could all get together there and stay during the storm. This okay, as far as I'm concerned. So the women and the men and the children, they all came. We all had plenty to eat. And the men, they kept on looking at the barometer. They would get more excited. They had to have another drink. By the time the hurricane came, 11, 12 o'clock at night, the men were out, and there was the hurricane. One time it was so bad, nobody could breathe. Hey, I can't breathe, somebody says. And then all of a sudden I noticed too that it was hard breathing. Well, we had all the windows closed on that side and the windows up and on the north side. And, well, we better get some air in here. So we opened the windows on the south side, you know. And boy, we felt better, you know. And all of a sudden, the wind came from the other side, blew all the lanterns out. We had the gasoline lanterns, you know. They flew down. The children start screaming. The women start screaming. The men solid drunk there on the floor and couldn't help us any. Oh, that made me mad. That really made me mad.
Did
The
you let
next-
them come back anymore? Did you
Well,
let?
see, we had been in the eye. That's why we couldn't
Yeah.
breathe.
Mhm.
And that's why everything got so close all of a sudden. And then when it came back, it came from the opposite side.
Yeah. Well, that must have been something.
That
I
was,
think we're about to run out of tape, and so I want to thank you very much, Ina, and thank you, Paul. And it's
They
been
wouldn't-
fascinating.
they wouldn't let me go out neither. So I sneaked out. Because I want to see that hurricane. I went up to the beach. But I stayed up on the high ridge, not because the water was rolling high, you know. And it was a kind of silly thing of me to do. And I know that the sand hit me so hard in the neck that I had to put something over my neck. And I went as far as Davis' store, Johnson's store, and the front had come down. And I saw cups, there was bright moonlight. I saw cups coming out with the water and I saw them go back to the house. The whole front had fallen down.
Mm.
I went there the next day and I insisted with the men folks to prop that house out to save it. But I saw the absolutely cups washing out and washing back in.
Mm.
And that house was, I would say, about 300 feet off the beach, off the water. And that's how far the water had come in.
Mm. Well, I've never been here in a hurricane. I don't believe I want.
Well,
And
anyway,
you should have seen Mrs. Bancroft, how scared she was when the little bit damage was done to her house. She can't.
you know how high
She
the
was
road is.
practically crying. She said, she's got to get out of there. And I don't know where to go, you know. I said, well, that's not so bad. That can be all fixed up. You wouldn't live there. I said, I most certainly would. Well, let's exchange houses. She wanted to take my Palm Avenue house, and I should take her house. That's how scared she was of her house. I said, you can get 20,000 for that any time. I think she got 25,000.
Well, she didn't get the buy you got. The
Well,
25.
That
no,
was
but
when she
then,
built on the Bayside.
Yeah, I know.
It wasn't a quite. I think she had that one built, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she had that
And
built on
like I
one-
say,
one-
she only had it one.